This is Paul McGuire. I want to talk to you about something, and that something that I want to talk to you about I call thinking outside the box. And most of you know what I mean by thinking outside the box. It simply means thinking outside of conformity, thinking outside of the prison of your mind, thinking outside of what you've been programmed to think, thinking your own thoughts rather than thinking what somebody has told you to think. Now, as simple and easy as that sounds, you would be surprised. Maybe you wouldn't be surprised. Most people you meet don't think outside the box. Their lives, their thoughts, exist in an itsy-bitsy tiny box. Maybe at most the size of a shoebox, and that's being generous. Most people live their lives, pretend your mind or their minds were like a small closet. And you open the door of that closet and you have a little chair and you sit in the little chair in your little closet with a dim light, the door shut, and that's all you can think about. Your entire world exists inside this tiny closet. Maybe you have an iPad or a laptop or something. But your world, or the world of people that you meet on the street every day, it consists of, their reality consists of just this tiny closet. And the reality is that's the way it is for 99% of the people that you and I meet. Now, I've never met you personally, maybe I have. But I can guess that most of you listening to me now, if you're listening to me now, chances are that you are a person who thinks outside of the box. Your world is not that tiny little closet. You've opened the door. You think outside of the way you've been programmed to think or told to think by the media. Isn't it interesting that the media in America and the rest of the world, it tells you what to think? It's like right out of George Orwell's book, 1984, where they had the thought police, and the thought police would monitor your thoughts and tell you how to think. Most people you meet, and you know this is true because you've talked to them, they think in a little tiny box, and they only think thoughts that they've been told they can think, and they don't think outside of that box. So if you're living in a little world, little closet, your life is in a prison. You live in the prison of your mind. And your mind isn't even your own. See, if you own your own mind, it means to whatever degree you control it and you direct it. Therefore, it could be said you own your mind. And I believe that every man and woman alive has been given the power to own their own mind. Now, I don't want to get into religious definitions at the moment, but let's say, for example, there was a creator or a supreme being. Well, that creator gave you a mind, and it's your mind to think the thoughts you want to think. It's what our founding fathers referred to as when they talked about the Creator giving you certain inalienable rights, such as life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So you have this gift that you can think the way you want to think, but most people don't do that. because they don't own their own mind, they give their minds away and they allow other people to control their minds. Most people you meet do not control their own minds. They don't own their own minds. Somewhere along the line, most probably starting in childhood, they began to give their minds away, and they have allowed their minds to be controlled by somebody else, so they don't own their own minds. And as such, they're slaves. They're robots. I mean, take a normal day or week in your life. You call some company on the phone because you have a problem. Let's say it's your bank. Let's say it's your internet company, or any number of companies that we have to deal with on the telephone. And they don't have a human being, for the most part, answering the phone. They have a computer answering the phone. And to have a computer answering the phone, that saves them money. They also make you wait time, because time is money. So the longer they make you wait, the cheaper it is for their cost of operation. So when you're put on hold by a company, it's not because they're busy. If you believe that, you don't own your own mind. It's because by making you wait, they increase their profits because they have to hire fewer employees. And then you talk to one of their employees, and occasionally you get an exception, but most of the employees, they don't own their own minds. They sound like robots. They talk like robots. They give you answers that they've been programmed to tell you. They don't have compassion. They don't think like people. They don't connect with you. It's like talking to a machine. And guess what? These people don't even realize that they spend 8 hours a day in their jobs, in their little cubicles, and they talk and interact with people as if they were a machine or a robot, and all their responses are unfeeling robot responses. And you meet these people everywhere in society. You can go into stores and into banks and talk to different departments, etc., etc. And when you interact with people, they say stuff like, "I'm just doing my job," or whatever. But the point is, they don't relate to you like human beings because they've stopped becoming human beings. Because the day they started giving away their own mind to somebody else, they don't own their own minds. And they have become robots. Because, see, a robot doesn't think for himself, if it's a he. An android doesn't think for himself. And huge numbers, the larger percentage of the people in our nation are robots. I mean, you know it and I know it. Just you talk to them. And then you try to wake them up out of their robot state. I do this all the time, and I'll say to them, "Look, you know, let's like have a human conversation. Just don't give me your automatic responses. Pretend you were in my place. Talk to me like a real human being." And most of them are frightened to do that. They won't do it. They're terrified. Some are brave, and they will. Most choose the robotic responses. By the way, when people start to give away their minds to the control of somebody else and become robots, how do you think Nazi Germany and Adolf Hitler rose to power, where they slaughtered 7 million people? Hitler was elected in a legal election by the people of Germany. Now, the people of Germany are very similar to the people in America. They're hardworking people. They were middle class. They worked very hard. They had an outward form of morality and decency. But guess what? These people who worked very hard, who had an outward form of morality and decency, elected a demonic dictator. They elected him. Why? Because they had spent their lives giving away the control of their own minds to somebody else from childhood. And so when Hitler came along and sounded convincing, because they didn't own their own mind, they gave their mind away to Hitler, and he controlled their thoughts, and he controlled them, and he told them what to do, and they became monsters, and they began to kill millions of people. That can happen anywhere, and it is, by the way, happening in America. And what is the root cause of that? The root cause of it is that the vast majority of people that you meet and I meet, their minds are like a little shoebox. Their inner reality of their brain is like sitting in a small, dimly lit closet, and they gave away control of their minds when they were kids. That's the root of it. I remember when I was a kid, growing up in Jackson Heights, Queens, New York City, and I remember going to school. I remember first grade. I remember before first grade. And I remember sitting in a square room with all the chairs lined up facing the teacher and the blackboard. And I asked myself earlier than first grade, I said, what am I doing in this square room, in these rows of chairs, listening to a teacher? I remember asking myself that. And I asked myself that because for whatever reason, I owned my own mind. See, I didn't give it away, so I had the power to question. And when you have the power to question, you own your own mind. When you have lost the power to question, you have become a robot. You don't own your own mind. You've lost your mind. And you are under the control. Your mind is under the control of someone else. So back in first grade, I said to myself, what is this? I mean, I seriously questioned this whole concept of being in a box in a room with chairs lined up, facing a teacher, and being told what reality in life was. You see, I would look out the windows, the big windows, and I would see reality on the streets, and I would come to my own conclusions. But you know what? When they build schools today, and this has been going on for the last 2 decades, they deliberately construct schools so there are no more windows. So the kids can't look out the windows and see reality for themselves and, quote, get distracted, because they want control over the kids' minds. Now, that didn't happen when I was a kid. I could look out the window, which meant I could think for myself. And when you think for yourself, you own your own mind. So I'm going to ask you this question direct. Do you own your own mind? Or have you given away control of your own mind? Is your mind like a little box or a little closet? Or do you think for yourself? Now, before you answer that question, I want you to consider something. Most people do not think for themselves. They have lost ownership of their minds. Therefore, they're prisoners, because somebody else controls their own mind. You have giant stadiums in America of people who call themselves Christians, and they claim to be seekers of the truth or followers of the truth. But they gather in these giant stadiums and they give away the control of their mind, not to God, but to an individual who has a certain amount of charisma, a salesmanship ability. And they give their minds over to a salesman who claims to be representing God. Now, you talk to these people, they don't think for themselves. They don't know why they believe or what they believe. All they know is they have a good feeling when they get together with thousands or 10,000 other people. But they don't ask any questions because they don't own their own mind. And for example, they don't ask themselves the question, why is it that the individual that I'm following is incredibly wealthy, and he claims to be a servant of God? They don't even ask that question because they've shut down their mind. They gave away their mind. You have people in all kinds of occupations and jobs just doing their job, just following orders. You hear that all the time. I'm just following orders. I'm just doing my job. That's the excuse, and that's the mantra of somebody who's given away their own mind. So here we are in America. And I don't know about you, but I've seen massive changes happen in our nation over the last number of decades. And things have gotten worse and worse and worse. And yet we're told on the television by both political parties are continually promising us this and that, saying they have a plan. And do you notice that no matter who gets in office, it doesn't matter which political party gets in office, the game plan is always the same, with minor differences. So if you vote for this party or that party, but the game plan is the same, wouldn't you normally think, if you owned your own mind, that both parties are really one party, operating under the illusion that they're two different parties? In other words, the idea of two different parties offering two different points of view or platforms is an illusion. In reality, there's only one party. And have you asked yourself the question, why is it that in a nation filled with so many talented, intelligent men and women, that we get a handful of, to be impolite but somewhat truthful, losers to vote for? And we always have to settle for the lesser of two evils. That's not a choice. The game's rigged. And you can see that if you open and own your own mind. Now, you look at your lifestyle and your opportunities, and if you own your own mind, you can see that your standard of living has declined. The value of the dollar that you hold in your hand buys less and less and less. Things aren't getting better, they're getting worse. Is it accidental? Do you believe it's really accidental? Do you believe for one moment that our present economic crisis is an accident? You really believe that? Because if you do, you don't own your own mind. You're thinking inside the box. And you need to step outside of the box and think for yourself with your own mind. And you will come to the conclusion that things are getting worse on purpose. Well, what could the purpose possibly be? Well, if you use your mind, it's obvious. It's about money. Money is being taken from you and transferred into the hands of somebody else. Now, they don't call it that. Well, actually, they do call it that now. And how is that done? Well, there's sophisticated mechanisms for doing that. One is called the mechanism of inflation. Inflation simply means this. You take $1 and you artificially print more dollars. The dollar is a rigged system. So this is how the game goes. The dollar originally, every dollar was backed originally by a certain amount of gold. So when you held a dollar in your hand, it was backed by something tangible like gold. Well, when the Federal Reserve Act was passed, 1913, 1914, which was when a group of independent international bankers took over the U.S. money supply, they passed the Federal Reserve Act, which simply means that outsiders took control of our monetary system. And now they can print dollars backed by nothing. Now, why that's important is because the more dollars that they print, it appears there's more wealth. But in reality, they're stealing money from you, because when they print more dollars backed by nothing, it takes $5, for example, to buy what $1 bought 5 years ago. And eventually it'll take $25 to buy what $1 purchased. You see, your money is inflated. It's blown up like a big balloon. It looks like it's big, but it's filled with air. That's how the game works. And it's a method of stealing. And the international bankers are fully aware of this. So, when you think outside the box, you can see that clearly. Now, let's talk about something else that affects your life. You're born. I was born. And I remember when I was a little kid asking myself 3 important questions. These 3 important questions, by the way, were never discussed in school, ever. And whenever I dared to bring it up, I was shut down by the teacher or the students. The 3 questions that I wanted to know the answer to, I was obsessed with finding the answers to these questions. Number 1, I wanted to know, why was I alive? Number 2, I wanted to know, what was my purpose in life? Number 3, I wanted to know, what am I doing here? They're all kind of connected. They're similar. Why was I alive? What am I doing here? And what is my purpose in life? Now, those are probably the 3 most important questions any person could ask themselves, because if you don't know why you're alive, and if you don't know why you're here, and if you don't know what your purpose is, then you're brain dead. You don't own your own mind. You think inside a tiny little box. You're sitting in a closet in a little chair with a dimly lit light bulb, because you don't have any idea what the world is really about or what reality is all about. What is reality? Now, I tried to bring this up in classes all the way to the university level. And I remember one time I asked the class in an English class at the university level, and I was pretty aggressive. And amazingly, the professor turned the class over to me, and he allowed me to talk for 45 minutes about these 3 questions. The professor, his mind was open. And as I looked into the eyes of many of the students, I began to see a sparkle and a life enter their eyes that wasn't there before. You know, when you look at somebody, when you own your own mind, you're able to perceive things that other people can't perceive. So when you look at somebody and they have a glazed over kind of dead look in their eyes, they look like they're in a hypnotic or trance state, well, they can talk, they can function in their job, they may even be a politician. But there's that subtle glazed look over their eyes, that dead look over their eyes. Well, you know what that is? That's simply sensory evidence of the fact that they don't own their own mind, that they've given away the control of their mind to somebody else, that no one's home. You're looking in their eyes and nobody is home. What that means is nobody is at home in their brain, that they have left their brain. They've become detached. See, that's how people become robots. They give over the ownership of their mind to somebody else and they become robots, and nobody's home and they can't think for themselves and they cease to be human. So those answers are available, by the way. You can find out why you're alive. You can know what your purpose in life is, and you can know the meaning to life. But you're going to have to look for it. I don't know what you think about Jesus Christ. I know what I thought about Jesus Christ. I hated religion when I was a kid. Around the same age that I was asking the questions about what was I doing in this box called a classroom, a few years passed by, and I remember used to walk by churches in New York City and how I hated the churches because I thought they were phony. Because I didn't see in the churches and the church people any reality to what they claimed to believe. I mean, I didn't know much about religion, but I saw some movies and read a little bit about Jesus Christ and how he performed miracles and things like that. And I didn't see any evidence in their lives of the miraculous, of something supernatural. I just saw a bigger box. The church was just a bigger box with a bunch of people, once again, sitting in rows and somebody up front telling them how to think. Another box, people sitting in rows with somebody telling them how to think. And again, the people gave control over their minds to somebody else. That's how I summed up religion, and specifically Christianity. I hated it. I despised it. But anyway, Jesus Christ did say, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but through me. And he said, knock and the door will be open. Seek and you will find. So he illustrates, and this principle has been illustrated by other spiritual teachers, that you have to look for something to find it. Jesus said you have to seek and then you'll find. In other words, if you're going to own your own mind, you have to make the choice, the inner choice, to think for yourself and to pursue, actively pursue, and to look for truth. And if you will seek, you will find. If you don't seek, you will not find. So you can find the answer to why you're alive or any other question, but you have to look for it. And if you look for it, it will appear. It's that simple. This brings us to another big question. The world right now is a very strange place. If you own your own mind, you can see that. Let's look at the obvious. Freak weather. I have never, and you have never, and it's a statistical fact, there has never been so much freak weather occurring in our nation and around the world ever before. Hurricanes, tornadoes, tsunamis, earthquakes, the ring of fire. There has never been so much mass starvation, famines, pestilences, disease outbreaks. I mean, things are getting very intense in this external environment we call reality. You would have to be blind to miss it. The threat, the imminent threat of all kinds of things, asteroid impact, disease outbreaks. And then you look at what's happening on the geopolitical scene. And you look at hundreds of thousands of Russian troops going into the Ukraine, U.S. troops, NATO troops, European troops going into the area of the Ukraine. You see Iran arming itself with nuclear missiles. You see Israel preparing to fire nuclear missiles at Iran. You see Syria and the conflict over oil, Russia, Iran, and the United States. You see wars breaking out. You see the expansion of China as an economic and military superpower, threatening to take back islands which they perceive are theirs. And you see that all of these nations have massive nuclear arsenals, huge military machines with satellite technology. I mean, it's there. And if you know anything about history, you know that the geopolitical factors that caused World War I were very tiny. They were very tiny, almost insignificant factors that led to World War I and millions of deaths. World War II was started by tiny conflicts and events that escalated into a global war where countless millions died in World War II. And what we see happening right now, the things that are happening now are huge in comparison to what started World War I and World War II. Based on that kind of historical evidence, the possibility of a World War III type conflict is very probable. And what's also probable is a regional thermonuclear war, potentially a global thermonuclear war. And coupled with that, an international economic crisis and all kinds of events where the system, the global system, breaks down. That's not fear. That's simply using your mind, making an appraisal of the facts, and processing the information. Now, as I said at the beginning, my name's Paul McGuire. I really am reluctant to bring this part up, but it's part of who I am. I'm the author of 23 books, and I have lots of information for you that will help you to think outside the box at paulmcguire.com. And McGuire's McGuire. But here's the big question. With all this intense stuff escalating, you have to ask this question. I did. I was obsessed with this question at a university I attended. And it was a question that was not allowed in the classroom to ask this question. Like most of the questions I asked, they were out-of-the-box questions. And you were shunned, you were shut down, you were marginalized if you attempted to ask the questions and demand answers. That, by the way, has never bothered me. Because you see, I own my own mind. I don't give my mind over to the control of other people. Therefore, I don't care what other people think. Because if you care too much about what other people think, then your caring about what other people think is really a mechanism by which you give over the control of your mind to other people. And when you give over the control of your mind to other people, you have lost your mind, which is a form of insanity, by the way. And you no longer own your own mind. You put your mind in a box. And that's a choice that I won't make. So I began to ask the question about what happens to me when I die? Because at the university, I calculated that no matter what happened to me in my life, whether I was a success or a failure or whatever, I was going to meet the same fate. Ultimately, I would die. So what did it matter? And this obsessed me. I was I had a dual major, filmmaking and altered states of consciousness, a brand new field of psychology. Now, these are fields that don't attract huge numbers of people, but they do attract people that think outside the box. And so I was obsessed with what happens when I die. Where do I go? Or do I cease to exist? I made a film about it. And I realized that I had to have the answer to this question. And part of the reason I'm bringing it up now is in the light of global catastrophic events like freak weather and earthquakes and biological warfare and chemical warfare and nuclear warfare and World War III, etc., or Armageddon, or who knows what, or just the fact that each of us is mortal and sooner or later we all die, I think it would be prudent that you and I would ask ourselves the question, what happens to us when we die? Now, the answer that we're told by the media and by the educational system, and by the way, I call the educational system the mind factories. It's an assembly line where they put thoughts in your brain and you come out like a product. Well, I'm not interested in being a product. I'm a person. So are you. I'm not a machine. I'm not a robot. We may live around robots, but you can choose not to be a robot, like I said. So I don't go along with what was told to me in the mind factory. I think for myself, and I think you probably do too. The mind factory will tell you that, well, when you die, your body rots, you disintegrate, and that's the end of it. I don't believe that for a minute. To me, that is thinking in the box, an itsy bitsy tiny box, and denying the massive reality that exists outside of the box structure. Let me give you an example. Let's take reality. Let's take your existence and my existence and the existence of every person you know. Forget about what you've been told to think. Burn it. Blow it up. Get rid of it. Toss it in the garbage. I don't think because I've been told to think. I own my own mind. And I'm not surrendering it to somebody who is telling me or attempting to program me how to think. It doesn't work that way. And I don't think it works that way for you either. So I've been told that I disintegrate and go into nothingness and that life really has no meaning. I don't believe that for a moment. Let me give you an example. Step outside of the box that they're telling you to think in and think your own thoughts. Imagine for a moment that you had your cell phone or an iPhone or an iPad or a laptop and you placed it on the beach near the ocean. Now imagine somebody discovering that who had never seen that before, who had never heard of cell phone technology. So they pick up the phone or the laptop and they begin to use it by trial and error. And they realize it does all these incredible things. Pictures come up, sound comes up. They're able to communicate with other people strangely when they dial numbers or press numbers. Now, if you were in your right mind, would you think that this cell phone, this iPhone, this iPad, this laptop was created randomly? By that, I mean that it just materialized over hundreds of millions of years spontaneously. Just the wind blowing, the tides coming in, the sand. They just assembled themselves together over millions of years, and they put themselves together spontaneously without any design, just randomly. They put themselves together in an artistic, creative shape. They built their interior electronic chip structure. They somehow acquired sophisticated software and programs and apps, and they could do all these things that require amazing mathematical, technological precision. And you look at it and you say, well, it just happened. And it happened over 300 million years. Now, who in their right mind would believe that? Nobody in their right mind would believe that. Only a fool, only an idiot, only somebody who has given their mind over to the control of a programmer, somebody else. Because nobody in their right mind could look at a piece of sophisticated technology like an iPad, an iPhone, a laptop on the beach and tell you that it just spontaneously created itself over 250 million years through the wind and the sand blowing. Only an idiot could come to that conclusion, or somebody who has been programmed to think in a box and cannot think for themselves. Now, conversely, an intelligent person, a person who is self-directed, a person who can think for himself or herself, a person who does not think inside of a box, a person who owns their own mind, can easily perceive from the sophistication of the technology, from how it operates, from its design, that this technology that we call a laptop or an iPad or an iPhone or a cell phone was designed by somebody. It was created. There's an intelligence behind it. And it could not have just built itself spontaneously through the wind blowing and the tides flowing. There has to be an intelligent designer. There has to be a blueprint. There has to be an idea behind this thing and a creator. That is the only conclusion that somebody who owns their own mind could come to. Now, you can debate as to whether or not who is the intelligence behind the design. Now, you can argue that. You can debate that, certainly. But to say that it was not designed is madness. And only somebody who's given away their mind and has allowed themselves since childhood to think inside of a box, beginning with the box of a classroom, and maybe the box of a religious system, or the box that you watch on television. Somebody in a box-like structure telling you how to think. Only somebody who has given up the rights to their own mind and cannot think outside of the box could possibly believe that that technology was spontaneous. So, in the same way, you look in the mirror. Now, this is out-of-the-box thinking. Out-of-the-box thinking is simple. You look in the mirror and you ask yourself, why am I alive? What is my purpose in life? And what's the meaning of life? Questions like that. You look in the mirror and you see that you have lips and teeth, a tongue, eyes, ears, and you can see your body. It's obvious you were designed. There's a symmetrical balance between a left half and a right half of you. You got a left nostril and a right nostril, a left eyeball and a right eyeball, ear on each side of your head, and so on and so forth. Split right down the middle. You're symmetrical. Your eyes is a sense a sensory organ which allows a visual sight processed in the brain neurologically. Your tongue is used for digestion and for speaking. You think inside your brain and you project what your thoughts in vocabulary, which is produced by your tongue and your mouth and your structural frame. And when you speak, there's a vibrational pattern that creates words or vocabulary that has meaning. Your ears hear sounds. You have a heart that beats, and if you put your hand over your breast, you feel the steady rhythmic beat in time sequence of your heart. You see your fingers, your dexterity. I mean, if you were an android or a robot, it would be obvious that you were built by some kind of intelligent design, a creator. But you're far more than a robot or an android, because you have a supercomputer between your ears. There is no computer at the present moment on planet Earth that has the level of technology, memory, and processing as your human brain. Where did it come from? Nothing. Spontaneous. Randomness. Baloney. Only somebody who doesn't own their own mind, who thinks inside the box, could believe such a ridiculous idea. A ridiculous idea programmed into you by somebody else externally. And the only reason you or anybody else would accept the programming that you came from nothing and there is no meaning to your life. The only reason, now here's where it gets dangerous, because I'm going to ask you something very dangerous right now. I'm going to ask you the question, are you willing to think outside the box? Are you willing to step outside the box? Own your own mind and think your own thoughts. Because if you are, what I'm going to ask you to do is potentially dangerous to your conformity, and it's dangerous to your mental imprisonment. So here's the question. Since it is logically and rationally impossible for you to have, or the human race to have come into being out of nothing spontaneously, since that is absurd, since that is ridiculous, then why do so many people believe it? So many people believe it because they don't own their own minds and they think inside a tiny little box. And they allow their thoughts to be controlled by somebody else. And therefore their thoughts inside their little box that we call the mind are programmed by a programmer. And a programmer, or a group of programmers, put the idea inside the box of their little minds that they came here from nothing, which almost sounds like hocus pocus or magic. It's so ridiculous. Now, being that it is ridiculous, it is illogical, it does defy all scientific evidence, why would so many people believe what is so blatantly a falsehood? Here's where it gets dangerous. Since there is no rational reason for accepting that belief inside the little box of your mind, then there has to be another reason that so many people believe it, and there has to be another reason why a programmer programmed the minds of millions of people to believe that absurdity. The programmer, or the group of programmers, obviously want to conceal from you and obviously want to conceal from as many people as possible the truth regarding their own existence. In other words, since these ideas didn't originate from inside their tiny little boxes, which we call their minds. And they were placed there by an outside program or programmer. The programmer seeded the idea in the box that they came from nothing and their life has no meaning, and they believe that. Since that is a falsehood, what is the intention of indoctrinating, brainwashing, using mind control to convince people to believe that lie? What's the reason? The reason is, now here is where you're going to have to think outside of the box. You're going to have to step really outside of the box. The reason is that the programmers who put the program in people's minds that their lives have no meaning, the reason for putting that thought in their mind is that when people believe that lie, they become powerless. They are easily controlled. And that's the issue. Listen very carefully. This is the central issue of this conversation. Who is controlling your mind? You or something outside yourself, a program or programmers? And why would they want to teach you that your life has no meaning? Unless that they were using that thought stream inside your tiny box called the mind as a mechanism of controlling you and turning you from a person into a robot which they own. In other words, by controlling your mind and telling you there's no meaning to your life, you're here by accident, they can turn you into a robot which they own, and they can turn you into a slave to do their bidding. But the entire programming system, the entire robot system, the entire slave robot system is based on embedding into human consciousness the thought program that your life has no meaning. As long as you believe that, you have given over control of your mind and placed it under their control, and therefore you become a product. The mind control factories are designed to produce a product. If you believe that lie, you are a product that can be bought and sold. Let me translate that for you. Thus you are a slave. And you are a slave to do the bidding of a master for the purpose of exploitation and servitude, as long as your belief system is contingent upon a system of lies. This goes back, way back in human history, to what we call the Pharaoh God-King system. Pharaoh convinced the slaves that he was a god king, and that he had a divine right to rule over them. Therefore, they willingly served him as slaves under the Pharaoh God-King system because they believed a lie. That's what's happened to you. Look on the back of your dollar. What do you see on the back of a US dollar on the left-hand side? You see a pyramid. That's the Pharaoh God-King system. And I go into further detail on that subject at paulmcguire.com. Now, let's zero in. Let's focus with laser-like clarity. You and perhaps not you, but most of the people you know are slaves. They do not own their own minds. They are under the control of a programmer. Now, I don't really care for the moment whether you think about religion. I don't think much of religion. I hate religion. And there's a difference between religion and spirituality. Let me state that to you again. There's a difference between religion and spirituality. Please don't confuse the two. Religion is man-made. True spirituality deals with the multidimensional nature of reality and its truth. Now, I don't know who you think Jesus Christ is. I believe he's the Son of God because he resurrected from the dead. He said these words, "You shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free." He was not talking about religious truth. He was talking about spiritual truth. And one of the things he meant by that is when you begin to believe the truth regarding your existence and the existence of a true God versus a false God, you become free. That's why Jesus said, "You shall know the truth shall set you free." So when you step outside of the little box, which is a concentration camp of the mind, by the way, and you think your own thoughts, you're given a choice, because when you think outside the box, you're not programmed. You're given choices. You're not forced to think. You choose to think outside of the box. And a choice you're given is the choice of freedom. If you choose to believe that you are not here by accident, but that you were made by a creator, and you place your faith, which is your trust, in that belief system, even though you may not entirely understand it, you are set free. Now, it goes into more depth than that, and we can explain that at a later time. But for an introductory exploration of thinking outside of the box, let us just say for the moment, we can pick it up later, that when you think outside the box and you choose to believe that you're not here by accident, but placed here by a creator, that is the first step in becoming free. And there's other steps that require the specific nature of your beliefs that come by choice after you have been presented with truth, but you choose whether or not to accept or reject the truth. When you accept the truth, which is to believe the truth, all of a sudden you are set free. You are no longer a robot. You are no longer an android. You are no longer a slave under the control of somebody's programmed to be manipulated and exploited. You are set free. That is a radical thing. And that will change every aspect of your life. It literally will blow your mind open. In fact, it will blow the doors, the window, and the roof of your mind completely off. And the little box that you were sitting in that little chair, in that little closet, with the dim little light bulb, all the walls will be blown off that closet. And all the walls of the box will be detonated open. And you will stand for the first time on God's earth, staring into a bright blue sky with a blazing sun, and you will see reality as it was intended to be viewed, as a free man or a free woman exploring this world that was created for you to live in. And the truth of that will hit you so hard It will turn you upside down and inside out. You will experience a revolution in your mind and your spirit. But for now, that's just the beginning. I'm Paul McGuire. I'd like to continue talking to you more. This is free. I don't make any money on it. Truth is free. And the only thing I ask is when you know the truth that you spread the word. I'm Paul McGuire.